I talk, well, it'd work. This is the biggest room this is the biggest elevation change room I've ever talked in. Can you see our slides okay? From all the way back there. My name's Neal Mueller. I work on the product team at Google on security, and I'm here joined by Colin.
Yeah, my name is Colin. I'm a cloud security engineer, so I work on like data protection and data privacy for our cloud customers.
What we're going to do today is a bit different than you might see normally. We're going to do the demo first, because we think that's what you want to see. We're mostly going to talk about research, which is public. So if you got two talks and you want to be both at the same time, you can see all of our slides on the website, and all the stuff we're talking about is public research. So if you want to be in two places at once, now's the time for you to do that. But stay for the demo, because it's amazing. That's just the first 5 minutes. We're here to talk about something called phishing. It's the scourge of the internet. And people like to pretend that it's why really, really valuable stuff gets stolen, but we know that's not true. That's rubber hoses, which you can see in here right now. Here in this cartoon right now is SKCD. On the left, you've got them talking about, like super RSA stuff. And on the right, you've got a rubber hose. Just wanted to put it in context of how the real world works. But let's talk about information sec. So we've got two things that we'll try to persuade you of during this talk. The first one is that the paradigm of passwords as a sole authentication factor is outdated. We all agree on this. We might not all agree on this yet, but we're here to persuade you of that fact. That the assumption that control of a phone number is sufficient proof of identity, that's false, because your phone number can be ported, it can be slammed. We'll walk you through all that stuff in a few minutes. But first, a demo.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to show people is that phishing pages are getting very sophisticated. And so we built one. There's a lot of training that companies put employees through to say, like, make sure you look really carefully at every link you click on and read the URL bar really carefully. The data we have suggests that's a really bad idea to count on the human to read every URL bar, especially after midnight. So this is a phishing site. If you look really carefully up here, you'll notice the URL is just not exactly right. But that's really the only thing wrong. Like in Chrome, this says secure. If I reload the page, we have the little animation here. Pixel for pixel, this is really just a reverse proxy. Okay, it's sitting in between the user and the actual Google login page maliciously. The best part of, about being a reverse proxy is when you sign in, it does exactly what the Google login page does. So in this case, I put in my username, it challenges for a password. If I type it wrong, it will prompt me and say that's wrong. When it sends a text message, it comes actually from Google. So let's see, is this the most recent one? There it is, yeah. So this is actually coming from 22000, just like it would from Google. This also works if you're using push, if you're using the Google prompts or authenticator, any 2P, OTP. And also if we type it wrong, so here's the actual code. If I change a code to 0, it says that's not right. Right? So again, the phisher is really smart. It's really just sending your keystrokes to Google, and then whatever Google reports back, it will return. When you're all the way through, it puts you to a page like this. And again, it's really hard to tell, but if you look, I'm not signed in. Right? So the problem here is the user got tricked, and it's really hard for them to tell something went wrong. Okay? So for us, the belief is you need to actually provide a credential to do this check for the user, rather than count on the user to do it themselves. Let me clear my data real quick, and then I'll show you what this is like when you are using a strong authentication method. So if we go back to the phishing site, I'm just going to change to a user that is required to use a U2F security key. So literally no different, same user, same password, but when I get here, I fail out. And this is exactly what we want to happen, okay? We want the user to fail out and not be able to provide a credential. Like, I can try all I want, I can try another way, but really it's going to say you have to sign in with a security key. And what's going on here is,
even though the user can't tell that it's not the correct HTML, the technology is preventing them from making a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. So even if your laptop was further pwned and this URL actually says google.com because your host file is compromised, we still fail out here. And I'll show you why. So what's going on in the background is we're actually doing bidirectional authentication. So it's not sufficient that the user has to demonstrate that they are who they say they are to the server. The server has to demonstrate that to the client as well. Okay, so the server sends its identity saying, hey, I'm google.com, I'm in a TLS state with you that's in this state, and then I need you to demonstrate that you have an end user in front of you, and the client responds in kind. It says, I'm connected to this particular URL, google.com, I'm in a TLS state with this connection state. I sign that response with a private key, so I don't actually divulge it, but I prove that I have the private key. I sign it and I send it to the server. So this all happens behind the scenes really quickly. In the phishing demo I showed you, two things fail. The first one is the URL doesn't match, so that fails out right away before we even go to sign it with a private key. It also fails the TLS check. So again, even if we're in the middle of a phisher who's got our URL, we still won't match TLS states. So really helpful, really powerful stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
How many people in the room have ever seen a security key?
Yeah.
Most of you. This is amazing. How many people use security keys? Okay, we are preaching to the choir. That's good. Great. One of the reasons why security keys are so important is because of blogs like this, which is a 2-year-old blog on the Coinbase blog, which is one of the only Bitcoin exchanges that hasn't been popped yet. But they've been attacked many times. And I'll summarize what I read in this blog because I thought it was so interesting. This was the first alert that they got at 10:12 p.m. that it looked like one of their employees' phone numbers had been ported. What you can read here on the top, it's Verizon saying, thanks for doing so much great stuff with us. Let's give you a survey to tell you how awesome we are. And then it says that someone had changed the password on. So this was, the first thing is basically, we successfully ported your number. And the second thing says, okay, you changed your password so you could do some more manipulation on the account. We just wanted to alert you of that, or something like that. They successfully recovered the password the following day, and then the following day after that, it got ported again. And this happened to multiple employees, and what happened when the number got ported, they used that to take over Facebook accounts and other messenger accounts, and then send messages to the CEO and other execs asking them to change their corporate passwords, which Coinbase has multiple controls in place. The point of their blog was to talk about all these controls. The damage that was done from this attack was, they said minimal, so I'm guessing probably 0, because any kind of Bitcoin damage is major, because it's irreversible. So their point was that they had multiple controls, but what they learned from this is that using text messaging in 2FA, while better than nothing, is not a really good place to rely, because numbers can be ported so often. The lesson they had at the very end was that you should call your provider and have them put a port block on your account, which I did after reading that blog post, and I recommend all you guys do too. Okay, that was the demo portion of the talk. And now Colin and I are going to be splitting up the next couple of slides where we talk about some really interesting research that we published relatively recently. There's a number of people that published it. If you guys went to Berkeley, you'll recognize Professor Vern Paxton's name, and a number of other Googlers. What we did here is we had the first longitudinal measurement study ever of the underground credential spilling market. And it looked at 3 ways that credentials get spilled: large breaches, phishing, and keyloggers. So we'll talk about each of them in turn. We're essentially doing this so you don't have to read the paper. What do you guys think these are? Okay, I mean, I'm at a security conference, so you guys are well versed. This is the #1 most popular password in 2015 and the #2 most popular password in 2015, according to Splash Data, who does a report of the worst passwords every single year. They basically don't change. People don't get smarter, except for us. We're smarter. But the people we're protecting aren't. The password, the phishing pages that you see, not Colin's, but like ones that are much worse. Colin's is probably way more successful than this, which is not a good thing. But the average phishing site is, we will take over someone's credentials with a 43% likelihood. So even if you train all of your users, this is the average that you'll get to. A lot of people get their accounts taken over, and we spend a lot of our time cleaning all of that up. In a self-reported study by the Pew Charitable Trust, they found that 15% of people had experienced account takeover. We suspect it's much higher. In fact, we know it's much higher because we do a lot of the cleanup after the fact, and a lot of users don't even know that they've been taken over. Banks do this too. We do this. A lot of the other big platforms as well do. And so they get taken over, and then we clean it up, and then they're asked to reset their password. We do this very regularly. And so we suspect that this number is much higher in reality. Okay, I mentioned these three. These are the large sources of stolen passwords. Let's talk about them each in a very unique way. Being Google, we've got access to some unique data that I think you'll enjoy learning about how we anonymously use. First one is phishing. Let's talk about how a phishing page works. I think given the number of hands that have been raised in previous questions, I'm going to go through this really fast. A phishing page is put up. It looks very similar to a page that you think you're logging into, but it's not actually. It's a stand-in. There's a PHP backend that then exfiltrates the data, usually via SMTP, often to Gmail. 72% of samples report via Gmail. Look at the blue arrow on the left. This is sample code from a very popular phishing kit. This means we, as the managers of Gmail, will have access to it. So what we do, and I like to read this so that I just say it in a way that's very clear. So we modified Gmail's anti-abuse detection systems to look for signatures that we found in 10,000 phishing kits over the course of March 16th to March 2017. This identifies the exfiltration points receiving stolen credentials, the volume of messages in each account it receives, and the volume of messages per kit template. So we basically are modifying an existing system that's designed to protect Gmail from abuse, and we're having it look for signatures that you saw from the previous, this right here. We're looking for these signatures in email. This is not a complete data set. For one, it doesn't take account of existing phishing kits that might use non-SMTP or non-Gmail repo. It also doesn't take account for phishing kits that have been modified to hide themselves from our signature detection. But anyway, these are the signatures that we're looking for, and we found a lot. What we did is we took a look at the signatures from 10,000 phishing kits. We did static analysis and found signatures that we could pull from the majority of them. And from there, by going through Gmail, using this anti-abuse technology, we were able to pull 12 million estimated credentials. And so we believe that this is a low estimate of the total number that in a single year were spilled by adversaries that are using these phishing kits. We were able to learn quite a bit from this. There are a relatively small number of phishing operators operating in a relatively small number of places. So only 19,000 phishers out there, based on our, this is a segment of a segment of a segment. But we found 19,000 of them, which was fewer than we expected. The vast majority are working out of one country, Nigeria, and they're targeting us. This isn't the case of keyloggers and breaches. We'll talk about those in a second. But we as Americans in America are targeted by phishing kits more than the rest of the world. This is also interesting. So like right around the time when I graduated college, I heard about phishing kits, and they basically haven't changed. The front ends and the customer service that supports the people that buy these phishing kits for like $35 have changed. They're slicker now, but the PHP backends have been unchanged in 20 years. Keyloggers. The most popular keylogger is a product called Hawkeye, which is $35. We were able to find 3,000 known victims by taking a look at 15,000 sample binaries, of which Hawkeye was one. It uses signatures as well, many of which that use the SMTP protocols that point to Gmail, which you can see on the lower left here. So we followed the same exact process that we followed for phishing, and we were able to find a smaller number of estimated spilled creds, and that allowed us to do some additional analysis, like what we did with phishing, but in this case for keylogging. And the results are very different. So 26% of the hijackers are operating out of Nigeria, Brazil, and Senegal. So more diverse than phishing, because we're adding Brazil and Senegal here. Phishing was just about Nigeria. Also, we're targeted a lot less. We presume that's because of antivirus. Maybe Chromebooks also. However, those in Brazil and India and a couple of other countries, Malaysia is not on this list, but they're also very high, are targeted by keyloggers. Okay, the third source of spilled creds is big breaches. And we've all heard of these. Many of them have happened a long time ago, but a lot of these passwords still work. We've invalidated them all on our platform, and all of the other major platforms have invalidated them there as well, but smaller platforms haven't, and so they really work. A lot of them are on Pastebin, but there's a lot of other forum sites out there. We took a look at 16 Black Hat forum sites and 115 paste sites. And we used a tool that's available to all of you, google.com. And we looked through the search index, and I've got some detail on that as well. That hopefully I pasted in this little notepad of mine. I didn't, but I know where to find it. That's what I wanted to read you. So we know that our coverage of these paste sites is incomplete because we don't crawl all of the sites on the internet. And we also, to make a more economical study, we only took a look at some of the sites. So basically, we took a look at any site that included at least 10 to 1,000 of the most common passwords. Well, you already know 2 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and password, or the MD5 and SHA equivalents, along with email suffixes for popular mail providers like @Yahoo, @Comcast, @Gmail, @Hotmail. And we used that. I mean, that was the majority of the initial query. And from that, we were able to find 2 billion credentials exposed. And just like the other 2 analyses, this is a partial analysis. This is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what is actually out there, because we don't crawl the entire web, and because we weren't looking at sites that had relatively small numbers of credentials spilled on them, just ones that had large numbers of creds. But using that, we're able to find a whole bunch of really interesting stuff, which I'll share in a second. Okay, people are reusing passwords a lot. We all knew this because many of us, until recently, were. The sites where they're using them the most are sites that might not be common to us, but are common to a lot of people in the rest of the world. And password reuse is across a lot of major sites. Okay, so in summary, we found 3.7 million creds because of phishing, 3,000 creds because of keylogging, and 2 billion creds because of third-party breaches. Now, all of these credentials were invalidated on our platform, in most cases a long time ago, but they still work on a lot of other platforms. And so they're useful for the adversaries in various ways. Now, what does this mean in terms of risk? So the credentials that we found, like I said, we invalidated on all Google properties, but not all of them were for even valid ever on Google. But let's say for phishing, if they were valid on 28% of them, if they were phished, were valid on Google accounts. And if they were ever there, is the password still working? Well, in 25% of the cases, the password is still working for phishing. So if the password is valid, was the account ever taken over? And there's a 400x% chance that the password was, that the account was taken over if it's from phishing. It's much, much lower for keylogging and third-party breach. And this huge multiplier that you see with phishing might cause you to ask why. Well, I think that's a very good question. We have a theory, and our theory has to do with geospatial information and knowledge of the target. So what you get when you use these phishing kits, especially the most popular one, is a lot of blue. So you can see blue is represented by the average phishing kit, red is the average keylogger, and gray is the average data breach. The majority of data breaches only spill the username and the password, and that's it, and nothing else. But on modern websites today, our platform and most of the other majors, that's not going to get you in. You need a lot more. Like if you're going to get past, I mean, yours mentioned phone number. Mm-hmm. There's lots of others that would mention, user agent or where the IP address is coming from. And you get that from keyloggers and phishing kits, and you get it a lot more from phishing kits. Look at the blue on the bottom here. User agent you get a lot from keyloggers, but you get phone number and secret question with a lot of the very popular out-of-the-box phishing kits. And we think that's why the likelihood of account takeover is much higher for phishing targets than it is for keylogger targets. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to take over?
Sure. So lastly, we want to talk through what we can do to protect users. And there's a lot of technologies that you've seen that are very common. The first one is safe browsing. So safe browsing is using the indexer to do things like look for phishing sites. We do that by looking for these very common kits. We also look for pages that appear to be masquerading another, right? So if you're a reverse proxy and we know you're proxying a page that's a real login page and you just are trying to look like the OWA page, we'll know that the safe browsing should block that. For those of you who are system administrators, you can control the behavior of this. So meaning, if you don't want users to have the button to click through this and say, I understand the risk, you can take that away. Very popular setting, especially in large companies where you want to defer, intelligence to safe browsing and don't trust the human. Secondly is Google's doing some analytics behind the scenes to determine when we should challenge for 2FA. So one of the most common things that we used to see is like cookie pulling, where you would hijack the device, pull the cookie, and then attempt to reuse the auth cookie on another device. Google's fairly clever at understanding like, oh, this thing was just transported off, I should re-challenge all of your cookies for 2FA again. So you'll see us programmatically ask you, you should sign in again. Like, I want you to go through the full auth stack. And again, like if you're being phished and it's just like a phone number or an OTP code, this will still fail, but it still helps prevent just like cookie hijacking by malware. Lastly, we'll do things like this, where we'll say, hey, we saw that cookie actively used twice, and we might actually suspend your account. So if you're a high-risk account, we'll actually do things like this to say, hey, we stopped an account from signing in, they've taken something from you, and we'll recommend changing password, and we'll surface as much information as we can. We also know this because we've done over 67 million proactive password resets, where we've literally sent someone a text and say, hey, your account is compromised. Please reset your password. It's fairly difficult for us to actually craft these so they don't look like phishing pages. One of the problems we have here is like, we're telling you click on a link and reset your password. We've worked really hard with UX to try to make that as least stressful on them as possible, because again, if you're trained to not be phished, this will look scary. So lastly, a couple things I want to say. Use defense in depth. Part of the way we design our systems at Google is we anticipate systems will fail. So, like we can't, count on safe browsing to catch every single page. At some point there will be an exploit that will make a security key fail. What I want to do is have a lot of layers that all need to break at once in order for me to fail, for a bad actor to get a credential. So the idea is like put multiple layers. We've talked about at least 3 while we're here. And I think we want to talk a little bit about what Google's experience has been. I forgot to mention, Google, we use about 38 different indicators of trustworthiness. So, part of what bad actors we see do is if they are trying to steal a credential.
Username, password, security key, where am I? What am I using? Yeah, geolocation, so they'll literally put their IP address in the same zip code as you to try to fool geolocation. So 6 and 32 I can't think of. Yeah, there's a whole bunch more, yeah. They'll have the same user agent, they'll have the same IP address, it's really, really easy for them to basically say, yep, I'm right over there. So we have a lot of other ways we can actually signal and look for the device to be, is this the same thing? A lot of you are using security keys, this is great. The advice I will give you here is security keys are really, really important for privileged users, and they're also very, very important for non-technical users, okay? Like the best this is the best defense for non-technical users, people who don't, use technology as their primary job, right? Like if you're an HR person or an accountant, if you issue them this token, I will feel so much safer knowing that their account can't be hijacked, and I don't have to teach them read the URL of the 1,000 web pages you click on every day. You can do this. You can use the same key for multiple sites. So, like my key, unlocks 5 different Google accounts as well as my GitHub account, and there's tons of sites that supports this. The cryptography behind this, I can talk to you about it afterwards, but there's a unique key that actually signs for every site. So there's not a risk of like credential reuse as you move from service to service.
Further, what Google found is when we rolled this out internally, is that security keys are a much better user experience for our end users than OTP. So Google Authenticator used to be the standard that we used internally. And we measured two things. How long does it take to log in? And the long story short here is that security keys are much faster. You can log in with a security key in about 10 to 11 seconds. OTP codes, you're usually at 20, so it's about half as fast to log in. And more importantly, our help desk incidents went down. So the number of support incidences that say, hey, something's wrong with my security key, like they're very, very small. It's like less than 5% relative to like what we saw with OTP, right? We saw tons and tons, like, because this makes sense. If your phone gets reset, or if you're like me and you flash new builds of Android twice a month, you have to reconfigure Authenticator all the time, and that's really difficult for a non-technical user. Or if you're relying on SMS, there's a whole mess of problems there that I don't need to tell you guys about. So long story short here is security keys cause fewer incidents, which means you can actually work on something important instead of helping people set up OTP codes. With that, I want to thank everyone for the attention, and are we taking questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 3 minutes. We can take a question if we want, yeah.
We have lots of time for questions, so please.
Yeah, you. I think it looked like it was this conversation, right?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, so the question was, how did we do this without impacting the users? And we couldn't do this for everyone. So we did this for folks who have a phone number associated. So in this case, we're assuming that they can still get to their phone. So essentially what we do is disable their password. When they use their last known password, we send their phone a link to say, hey, like prove that you're you by having your phone number. So we're kind of like passively enabling 2FA for them. But that's what we're using. We're using a second factor to essentially validate they're real. Because again, their email is going to be where this link exists. So if we send them a link to an account that's compromised, you're in a loop. Yeah, you're in a loop.
Facebook has done some neat work there, where you can add trusted friends, and then your friends can get you out of jail. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Right here.
During the demo, you went over the second component where you had the OTP, you had the physical key rather, the key in the device, and you leveraged that. You had the phishing site where it routed to the phishing site and then to Google, and it prevented that. How would that work if you did falsify DNS, if you had a fake DNS server that you upstream?
Yep.
How's it going to block that if it thinks it's actually Google?
It's TLS.
Oh, it's all TLS. Okay.
So we check the URL as well as the TLS state.
Okay.
So
Just to repeat the question, he was asking,
Yeah.
what if you falsified DNS?
yeah, if you spoof the host file and you say google.com is now 127.0.0.1 or something crazy, we check the TLS state. So the server will be in a TLS connection with the phisher, and again, the Google will report I'm in a TLS state, and that's condition blue, and the client will say I'm in condition red. It won't match and will fail out. Yep.
So even if you did like something like burp and you had a local proxy, you could still, okay.
Yeah. So we make sure that the client is really connected to the person that sent the challenge. Yep.
That's cool.
Yep.
Hey, you guys have sort of best practice documentation for how you guys communicated the rollout of the keys, you say, and leadership. Like, so basically, how do you convince the non-technical folks that don't care about what's it going to cost? It's going to piss people off.
Yeah.
Beyond Core white paper?
Yeah, we have two. So there's two white papers. One's Beyond Corp. Beyond Corp's a little more general, and then we have one that's it's actually on Google's experience with security keys. It's very similar to the one you referenced. The thing I would say is Google had a phishing incident rate, that's some percentage prior to rolling out security keys. In the 4 years we've had these 100% deployed, we've had 0 successful phishing incidents. We've had lots of attempts, right, but no incidents in 4 years. And I think that's really, do you want to drive this thing to 0? Because if you do, this is the proven researched way to do it.
What's that program, Advanced Something Protection?
Oh, the other thing is if you're not enrolled for your personal Gmail account, get 2 security keys, and you can enroll in what we call advanced protection, which will essentially protect your consumer Gmail account the exact same way we protect our corporate accounts, where it requires security keys to log in, and we do heightened monitoring of that account to look for things like takeover and hijacking.
And
if you have an iPhone, make sure one of your keys is Bluetooth.
And if you want strategies of how to communicate this to executives, the Advanced Protection website, just Google it or email us, will give you like good things to say. The product page for that is really nice.
Yeah, one more question.
Yeah, so while I appreciate the emphasis on using factor keys, the fact is that there's not a whole lot of apps that are consumer use that work with that. It allows us to have more value as well. What are you doing to push that down?
Yeah, so the question is, security keys are great, but they work almost nowhere. Did I characterize that correctly? It's a problem. It's also a problem that the largest deployment of security keys is us. We think both of those are problems, and we're working really hard on them.
Yeah, we've done what Google normally does, which is open source it. So it's open source, anyone can use it, and it's free. And we've essentially published research about how great it is. Short of paying people to do it, we're thinking about next steps. Yeah.
The biggest burden that we recently overcame was how to make it work with phones. And so there's a Bluetooth key that works really well. The first one didn't work so well. The next one that I've used works really well. And it lets you log into all of my corporate Goog stuff via a push button, which is really nice. That was one of the big hurdles. And so we're stepping over all these hurdles. Yeah, your point's well taken.
Well, thank you, but I think we're out of time. Yeah, I'm sorry I have to cut it off. Great
Thanks, everyone.
questions.